Okay. Good afternoon, Australia, and good morning, India. Today is a very special day. PM Modi and PM Morrison are actually involved in a virtual summit as we speak in this webinar. They're holding the first ever bilateral virtual summit between the two countries. There seems to be a lot of momentum in this relationship, which has picked up over the last 2 years. And hopefully today's meeting will set new milestones and identify new synergies for the two countries. So thank you all for joining us today for Newland Global Group's Australia-India webinar series. Today, the title of the series is Resetting Global Supply Chains, India's Opportunities. In the past few months, nearly 75% of global companies have witnessed significant supply chain disruptions, also exposing the dependence on these companies on a single country as a focal in their value chain. Can disrupted global chains be India's opportunity to provide itself as a viable alternative? We will find out more in today's session with our distinguished speakers. I'll start off with asking the Consul General of India to Sydney, Mr. Manish Gupta, to say a few words, and I'll introduce him quickly. Mr. Gupta will provide the introductory remarks. Manish Gupta is a career diplomat and a member of the Indian Foreign Services since 1998. In the course of a diplomatic career spanning over 20 years, he has held various positions in New Delhi and abroad. He has extensive experience in dealing with multilateral issues, and is playing an integral role in taking forward the Australia-India ties. Mr. Gupta, over to you.
Thank you, Dipen. Dear friends, colleagues, distinguished participants, indeed it's a pleasure and privilege for me to join you today. I know, Dipen, you and your entire team has been working hard in organizing a series of webinars focusing on the India-Australia partnership for the last few weeks. And as you have rightly said, today is indeed a very special day, as we have the first virtual summit between Prime Minister Scott Morrison and our Prime Minister Honorable Narendra Modi ji. I think that's a testament to our deepening of our multifaceted ties that characterize our two countries. But today's uncertain times, as we see, the COVID pandemic is a major black swan event. Prime Minister Morrison rightly described it once in a century crisis. It has disrupted global supply and value chains that we have never seen before, at least in our generations. And the world is bracing for an unprecedented depression. Probably this will be the first big thing after the Great Global Depression where we can draw nearest comparisons from. And certainly it is bound to push the global economy into recession. The unprecedented depression that we see is going to have far-reaching consequences all over the world. But one thing in this entire pandemic is stark, it's obvious. The over-dependence on one particular geography has exposed the vulnerability of the global economy. Like in Australia, in India too, we are also facing a daunting challenge. But we are working hard in transforming this moment of challenge into a series of immense opportunities. We aim to fast develop our production and supply chains to fill in the gaps in the global value supply system where we have the potential to do so. Honorable Prime Minister Modi envisions India to emerge as the nerve center for global supply chains. Recently, let me very briefly focus on the government of India has announced a series of bold economic reforms under the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. The Prime Minister identified key pillars of our future economic roadmap, namely the economy, infrastructure, demography, democracy, and supply chains. And the focus will be on land, labor, laws, and liquidity. These reforms will build upon the ambitious, path-breaking work that the government has done during the last 5 years or so. The rollout of the Goods and Services Tax, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, opening of banking accounts for every Indian households, to name a few. They have been able to put India and transform the country into a single unified marketplace, ensure use of technology in delivery of our public services, and these are reflected in the improvement of India's ease of business doing rankings, which was 63 last year, the Global Innovation Index, where India stood 52 last year. This is a testament to it. The latest reforms are going to provide a big boost to our private sector also, in particular sectors which are of interest to the Australian economy. These include coal, minerals, defense, space, power distribution, and atomic energy. These are the things where Australia is also looking for and provides the right synergies for our two countries to work together. In Australia, one thing I have seen, the IT and IT-enabled services profile of India is well known. In fact, it is the Indian IT industry that has kept the wheels of the global digital economy humming even during these times of crisis. And a lot of this we owe to the efforts of the Indian IT professionals. However, perhaps I think same is not entirely true when it comes to the manufacturing sectors, about the right awareness that we need in this country and the opportunities that beckon us. India's manufacturing base is very well diversified. Innovation, low labor costs, and a vibrant demography have always been the key strengths of the Indian economy. One particular field I would like to recall and emphasize our reputation as the pharmacy of the world, and the source of low-cost generics and drugs is lost to no one during this crisis. In fact, many of our Australian friends would recall the Sydney metro trains that were launched here last year. They all were manufactured in India under the Make in India initiative. As Australia looks forward to diversify its risks, India could be a natural partner of choice. We both are G20 countries. Our economies are well positioned to complement each other. We deeply value our human resources. We share tenets of democracy. We believe in fair go and equality of opportunities. But one thing I really would like to emphasize, it's high time that we need to reduce the salience of transactional nature of our economic relations. We need to put this relationship on a more sustainable footing. A bilateral trade of around Australian dollar $30 billion a year is no way fully justifies the true potential of this relationship. Sitting here in Australia, I can certainly say the mining, resources, agrotech, renewable energy, pharma, healthcare, startups, and research, to name a few, these are important sectors that can drive this relationship forward. The Australian business and industry can invest in the Government of India's flagship programs, the smart cities, the Make in India initiative, the Startup Indias, that offers big opportunities. And also the super fund industry over here in this country, they can benefit a lot by investing in the India infrastructure sector. Truly, the Australian business and industry is well positioned to take advantage of the thing. Our 700,000 strong diaspora over here and over 100,000 strong Indian community. These are no small numbers. You are big reservoirs of talent and a big asset that can be tapped in advancing our partnership. Our huge domestic market and the fast rising middle class provides unparalleled opportunities to the Australians here. To my Australian friends, I would like to certainly emphasize there's no need to think about a T20 match. When we talk about India, think about playing a long cricket innings. I'm really delighted we have two eminent speakers joining us today. Mr. Amitabh Kant, he has holds perhaps all key positions in the government and is now the CEO of the Niti Aayog. He is the key drivers of the government's flagship programs, Make in India, Startup India, Incredible in India campaign, to name a few. Sir, a very warm welcome to you here from Sydney. And we have another distinguished panelist today, Mr. R.S. Sodhi. He is the MD of Amul India. Again, to my Australian friends, I would like to emphasize it's a company that has been accredited with spurring the white revolution in India. And it's the largest cooperative not only in India, but also in the world. I look forward to a very enriching discussion today. We deeply value your views, observations, and feedback. Please be in touch with me in the consulate as well as with the Newland Global Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. May I now request Mr. Amitabh Kant, CEO of Niti Aayog, to share his insights. Just a little bit about Amitabh and Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog is the National Institution for Transforming India. Is the official policy think tank for the government of India and is chaired by PM Narendra Modi. Niti Aayog is tasked with catalyzing economic development by identifying national priorities, creating an enabling environment through partnerships and strategies, and fostering cooperative federalism. Mr. Kant has been a key driver of the Make in India, Startup India, Incredible India, and God's Own Country initiatives that aim to position India as a leading manufacturing and tourism destination. He has also served as a secretary for the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion and oversaw the industrial policies and strategies to drive development and grow and work to improve India's ease of doing business ranking to drive foreign direct investments. Over to you, Mr. Kant.
Good morning, Dipen, very distinguished Consul General of India, Mr. Manish, and Mr. Manish Gupta, and my distinguished friend, Mr. Sodhi. A very, very good afternoon to all of you in Australia, and a very good morning to India. Today is a very, very special day. It's very unique in many ways, largely because of this virtual summit between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Scott Morrison, and the very warm relationship that they have was displayed in this virtual summit, and it covered a wide range of areas. It demonstrated also that the India-Australia bilateral relationship has undergone very significant evolution in recent years. It has developed and grown along a very positive track, and it's blossomed into a very friendly partnership. The two nations have much in common, underpinned by very shared values of a pluralistic Westminster-style democracies, Commonwealth traditions, expanding economic engagement, and increasing high-level interaction. We have several commonalities, including strong, vibrant, secular, and multicultural democracies, free press, independent judicial system, and of course the English language. They all serve as a foundation for a close cooperation and multifaceted interaction. Australia is also a fellow traveler with us in our commitment to disarmament, global peace, North-South dialogue, human rights, environmental protection, and combating international terrorism. We've had a long-standing people-to-people ties. I've grown up seeing many Australian cricketers and hockey players. One of my prized treasures in my room, in my office room, is a cricket bat presented to me by the very aggressive Australian cricketer Adam Gilchrist. We've enjoyed the great beauty of Australian batsmanship and their very aggressive play on the cricketing fields, both in India and Australia. We have an increasing number of Indian students going to Australia for higher education. We have growing tourism and sporting links, and all these have strengthened bilateral relationship between the two countries. The relationship has actually grown in strength and importance since India's economic reforms in the 90s, and we've made rapid strides in several areas: trade, energy, mining, science and technology, information technology, education, and defense. But I think the important thing is that this bilateral relationship between the two nations, over the years, we've had an array of institutional mechanisms that have been put in place to promote bilateral cooperation, one of which is the annual meetings of the two prime ministers. my personal view is that there is a huge possibility and a potential between Australia and India in both economic and trade relationship, and in a vast range of areas from education to agribusiness to tourism to health to financial services to infrastructure to sports, science, innovation, and many, many areas. But the present times are very challenging times, and the outbreak of COVID-19 has actually exposed the weaknesses associated with the existing global trade order. And this existing global trade order, the supply chains will definitely get disrupted, and the global value chains will see a radical transformation in the days to come. The breakdown of logistics and restrictions imposed on the movement of people has raised questions about the viability and future of global value chains. But my personal view is that global value chains will continue, but their nature and geographical directions will change. And therefore, in this scenario, India offers a very, very safe and a very lucrative market for such investors. The size of India's domestic market, the availability of a very, very vast and abundant workforce, and India's very liberal FDI policies are incentives for the investors who are trying to reestablish their value chains post-COVID-19. I would merely like to say that in recent years, India has focused very strongly on making itself very, very easy and simple. It has jumped up 79 positions in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business. No country in the world has done this. Our FDI has grown very rapidly. Our FDI in the last 5 years has grown by about almost 66% at a point of time when FDI across the world has fallen by almost 16%. We've continued to focus on greater liberalization. In fact, the government's view here is that COVID-19 is an opportunity for massive structural reforms. And therefore, from agriculture to coal mining to mineral resources to many, many areas, we've carried out some of the biggest structural reforms seen anywhere in the world. And therefore, this is an opportunity. There is a huge amount of, we are putting out 50 coal mines for commercial mining, which has never been done before. We are putting out 500 big, large mines out for exploitation of our mineral resources, never done before, at very easy terms and conditions, very easy terms and conditions. And I'm willing to sit down with any Australian company to have a detailed deliberation in this regard. For us, we view this as every crisis is an opportunity, and this is a unique opportunity to give a huge impetus to India-Australia relationship. The current government realizes that our relationship is still at, as was mentioned by the Consul General, our trade relationship at about 30 billion is a very, very small component. It needs to grow 10x, minimum 10x in the next 3 years. And the current government realizes this. It has announced a range of policies to encourage the Indian manufacturing sector. What we are doing is that in certain areas where India is a core competency, like mobile manufacturing and electronic manufacturing, like textiles or like network products or like medical devices, pharma production, food processing, solar panel manufacturing, advanced battery manufacturing. All these, we have announced incentive schemes. These are called production-linked incentive. The more you produce, the higher is your incentive. Above the present base level, you keep producing more, you get incentives. And we are very keen to attract Australian investments. Our philosophy is twofold: to invite investors from the world, create scale and size of Indian manufacturing, where FDI is a very critical component. Apart from the central government, state governments have also addressed a vast range of issues on improving labor relations, on providing easy terms, bringing in predictability and consistency of policies so that firms are able to grow and size and scale. If you look at historically, the physical infrastructure in India was considered weak. The scenario has radically changed in the last 5 years' time. Our turnaround time of shipping, our improvement of at ports we've seen a massive efficiency there. We've seen a huge improvement in electricity supplies. For the first time in its history, India has become a surplus power nation and has exported electricity to its South Asian neighbors, such as Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal. We've pushed to the limit our execution of projects, roads and highways. We are laying roads per annum at about close to 11,000 kilometers, which means an average of about 35 kilometers per day. And this is a huge improvement. And while some of the roads are made by National Highway, we actually sell them off once they are de-risked. That is, tolls start coming in, and many Australian companies like Macquarie, etc., have invested in these infrastructure projects where there are no risks. The roads are ready, the tolls are flowing in, and we would like Australian companies to get into some of these projects. We are opening up our airports, we are opening up our ports, we are opening up our roads, we are opening up our sports stadium for private sector investment. There cannot be a better time for Australian companies to get in. As I said, we've always been an attractive destination for foreign investors. Our FDI has grown. We've totally liberalized in our FDI regime, but anything else that the Australian investors feel, we've also opened up our coal and mining, but anything else that you feel that is required in terms of improving ease of doing business, of continuing our liberalization process of FDI investment, we will definitely help you in doing this. Recently, the government has announced Atmanirbhar Abhiyan, and that is about building India for a global economy. That is, you become a champion locally but penetrate global markets. It's about penetrating and becoming an integral part of the global supply chain. And vast opportunities have been opened up in minerals, defense, coal, and all the lucrative sectors. And this, to my mind, is a huge opportunity for Australian players to look at manufacturing in India. A sectoral approach has been adopted to create sectoral ease of doing business and incentives. We've pushed for a greater level of opportunities for foreign investors in the FDI regime. To my mind, this is a huge opportunity. This is a massive, massive opportunity. We've had close relationship with Australia. We have a people-to-people relationship with Australia. Many of our students go there, but I think there is an opportunity to restructure that by building up a collaborative partnership with Australian universities, with Indian universities. The staff of constant Indian students going to Australia will at some point of time dry up. And it's important that this collaborative relationship where Australian universities, Australian colleges partner Indian colleges and universities here is very, very important. Moreover, our view is that across a range of infrastructure sectors, across a range of manufacturing sectors, we will continue to de-risk. We will continue to keep opening. We will continue to become the most happening economy by being easy and simple. The government's objective is to make India the most easy and the most simple economy in the world. We have an Invest India which will hold your hand. We have the second most dynamic ecosystem in the world for our startups, and we have one of the most vibrant and innovative ecosystems. And we would like younger companies, not merely companies who will invest in minerals, who will invest in roads, who will invest in highways, but we like our younger companies from Australia, our startups, to collaborate with Indian startups. I don't think there can be a better opportunity Every crisis is an opportunity. The COVID-19 has opened us the opportunities to do structural reforms in India, and it's 3 years down the line, it'll be too late for the Australian companies. This is the time, seize this opportunity, and anything we can do for you, anything we can do to support you, assist you, handhold you, and provide impetus to you to create wealth for your company and for Australia and for India, we will do that. We will be very happy to assist and support you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Great pleasure interacting with all of you.
Thank you so much, Amitabh. Wonderful. Always exciting listening to you. Always get refreshed and energized. Thank you so much. So we've heard the government's view. We're now moving on to a private sector entity, not so much private sector, but a company that is into the manufacturing and supply chain in a huge way in India, and that is Amul. Our next speaker is Mr. Rupinder Singh Sodhi, who's the Managing Director of Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation, better known as Amul. Mr. Sodhi has headed the marketing and the sales functions for Amul for more than 2 decades and has spearheaded their highly innovative and widely acclaimed marketing campaigns to ensure that the younger generation of Indians enhance consumption of milk and dairy products. He has been instrumental in launching more than 50 new products during his tenure. And the visionary head of Mr. Sodhi was handpicked by Amul by none other than the man behind India's White Revolution and famously known as the milkman of India, Varghese Kurian. Mr. Sodhi, over to you.
Thank you, Dipenji. It's a privilege to be on the panel with Shri Amitabh Kantji, CEO Niti Yog. Who is steering the whole India into a future of self-reliance and making India a big economic force in the world. And Shri Manish Gupta, Consul General in Sydney. Well, if briefly I tell, Amul, which is today's $7.5 billion company or cooperative, India's biggest food company or FMCG company. We are operating for the last 72 years and mainly in the dairy or milk sector. And we are owned by 3.6 million farmers of mainly one state of India, which is Gujarat. And whatever we are operating all the categories of dairy, and in all the categories, we are the market leader. And last 10 years, if you see our CAGR, average growth is around 17%. And we are continuing both in milk procurement and in marketing also. So if size-wise I tell you about the Australia, we handle around 10 million metric ton of milk, which is Amul handles, which is equal to Australia's milk production, because India is producing 190 million metric ton. And as far as our supply chain is concerned, like I said, because Amul is a company of supply chain which is owned by the farmers, and they not only produce milk, they process and market it also under their own brand name. What, like in Australia, you had Amul Gorbun. I know they have not sold up to Saputo, but they were operating in Australia for last so many. Along with the Amul, they started in Australia. And you see, our supply chain starts with 3.6 million farmers. Then we are collecting milk from around 18,700 village cooperative societies, bringing this milk to around 200 chilling stations and 82 dairy plants, not only Gujarat, all parts of India, because we are selling fresh milk in more than 1,000 cities of India. You name the metro, you name the state, we are present. And then selling our products to around 1 million retail outlets through 10,000 distributors. This is the whole supply chain. Why I'm telling this supply chain is, this is because when the lockdown India was announced like the other parts of the world during COVID, so one thing was to maintain supply chain in this urban India, but more than important that thing is the procuring milk from our members. You see, in India, if you talk, dairy is the major source of livelihood for rural India, where 68 of our people reside. And dairy is today is around $110 billion crop. It is the biggest crop. You combine wheat, paddy, pulses, all put together is bigger than that. And around 100 million rural families are dependent. So, continuing dairy supply chain essential not only from consumer point of view to provide them the very important part of food, but also to provide them the livelihood. So, for not a single minute, this supply chain stopped during lockdown. The reason has been very simple, because the whole supply chain inventory is only of one day. If you stop selling milk in Delhi or Calcutta or Bombay, you have to stop procurement milk from the farmers. In our case, 3.6 million. And I'm like, here I like to tell all the audiences, when the lockdown was announced on 25th of March, we thought we have to take lot of permissions, we have to take lot of authorities approach. But to our surprise, on 25th only proactively we started getting calls from the various government authorities, starting with Ministry of Home Affairs, the Chief Minister officers from states, Chief Secretaries, asking us or telling us that Amul should not stop milk procurement from the farmers and also distribution of milk in the other states. So that was very encouraging. And I think we have to, it took 2-3 days to streamline, but not for a single minute. Our milk procurement, processing or distribution stop. We have to take permission, we have to encourage, we have to communicate to all our supply chain partners, right from farmers to our distributor or our workers, that milk is an essential product. It is not only your duty, but it's a national interest also. So I'm very happy to say that rather reduction in business during this lockdown of business increase, we started getting 15% more milk, which is around 4.5 million liters per day. And we product demand also increased, because initially there was a panic buying, and then in spite of closer hotel restaurant segment, demand from house segment increased for all the product categories. So we maintain the supply chain with the help of our supply chain partners, with the help of local administration, and no doubt with all the consumers also appreciated it. Now coming to the question is that what is the, after this COVID lockdown, what are going to happen in India? So I'm talking more about food. So one change, first thing, let me tell you, there will not be any new normal. It is more or less going to be normal what was pre-COVID after, and that we have seen also. But there is slight shifting. We have observed that now people are going more towards in food packed of safe, good quality, trusted brands and affordable products. Because India is a country of middle class and lower middle class. So that opportunity India is going to grow manifold, whether you talk about Australian companies or any other company, big expansion in demand of packed food product. If I give you example of India, Indian food market is around, I believe around $400 billion, and branded is only 100. In case of dairy, if I say $110 billion, packed or branded is only $30 billion. So one third of a total. So there is a huge opportunity for the food or dairy companies to invest in India. But only one catch is there. India is different than the developed countries as far as the food supply chain is concerned. India's supply chain is very, very efficient. I had a talk with a lot of CEOs of world's biggest food companies who have come to India, tried also, gone back also, still operating. They say we are nowhere in the world the supply chain is so efficient. Second is Indian consumers are now shifting more towards in food local products. Already our Honorable Prime Minister, vocal for the local and local for the global. In food, people have realized that food produced, packed, and marketing nearer to his or her is better for him. And lot of local companies have encashed that. Efficiency wise, I give you just one example. In case of packed milk from factory to consumer, our supply chain marginal expenses are only 5%. Vis-a-vis any developed country, it is around 30 to 40%. Because our people are very, very low margin and very, very efficient. People may say, so any global food company coming to India is they have to match this supply chain efficiency. Second, in dairy, I mean, India is a source of livelihood for 100 million people. Not like if you take example of Australia, only 5,700 farmers are there, and for them it is a business. For Indian, so what we have been propagating last so many years, 4 decades, that Indian farmers need to be encouraged. Indian dairy industry need to be protected from free imports. See, why India became not only self-sufficient but world largest producer milk. Till mid-70s, we were dependent on imports. But Indian farmers, policymakers, and Indian political leadership decided that we have to become self-reliant. And within 20 years, from 21 million metric ton, today we are 190, 9 times more. We were in mid-70s, we were 1/3 of USA and 1/8 of Europe. Today we are double than the USA and 25%. Why? Because farmers, policymakers, and political leaders said we have to. I give example in case of edible oil. Edible oil also we were till mid-70s or mid-90s self-sufficient, 90% self-sufficient. But that time policymakers or political leaders had to give cheap oil, edible oil to Indians. We started zero duty imports, and now we are dependent on 70% on imports. But now last 3-4 years, again duties have started increasing. So what I want to tell all the investors, in 20% market of the global world is in India. Biggest food market, fastest growing market, but very supply chain efficient market. You are welcome to come India. You can invest, you will get. Only thing what we request, like in dairy, bring your capital, bring your knowledge, build your technical, but buy milk from Indian farmers, and market is there in India. One has to do. And especially one more angle which I am telling opportunity wise is because recently government of India has announced around $2 billion package for dairy infrastructure fund, for establishment of dairy infrastructure, just India's finances. So with that $2 billion, we can establish 15 million liters processing facilities in the organized sector. And for 1,000 liter, 100,000 liters dairy capacity, there are 6,000 jobs generated, 5,000 in the villages, 1,000 in the supply chain. So with this 50 million capacity out of $2 billion in dairy infrastructure, we can create 3 million rural jobs in the rural India. So that is so market is there, production is here. Only thing is what is required, bringing goods from unorganized to organized, and there a lot of investments are required. And this is like Mr. Amitabh said, these are right opportunity. Nowhere in the world you can grow the fast than like India is there. So this is what I want to say is that investments are welcome, market is there, but please source raw material from India as far as food is concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Sodhi. Again, very enlightening and exciting presentation. a little snippet of the food industry, particularly the dairy industry, and the supply chains within the food industry. I think they're a little bit more sensitive because obviously food for human consumption is very sensitive. And so having some efficiencies or excellent efficiencies in the food supply chain, it's good to know for Australian companies. We'll get on to some questions. I've got quite a few questions that have come in. I'll try and pick and choose a few for everybody. The first question is for Mr. Manish Gupta. Vash Gajrai has asked, how can we connect with Australian companies and how can we get to collaborate?
You know, of course, this is a question from India, I guess.
It is.
Yes. So certainly in the consulate, we have a dedicated trade and commercial wing in place. So please write to us. We'll put you in touch with the right stakeholders. Also, the Australia-India Business Council. This is one of the big pivotal bodies over here that's playing a big role. You can also be in touch with the AIBC. Either of the two, please send us your coordinates and the sector you are looking in, and we'll advise you rightly what needs to be done.
Thank you. This question is for Amitabh from Rajiv Dubey. For meaning economic engagement, we need an active India-Australia Business Leaders Forum, ambassadors from industry on both sides, flagship investments on either side, free movement of talent. What specific steps are being taken in these areas?
So I think we have a Business Leaders Forum, which has been meeting during the annual summits of the two Prime Ministers. This time it's got impacted because of COVID-19. But irrespective of that, let me only state that there are vast opportunities and across, because of the recent liberalization across sectors, across providing incentives for high manufacturing, electronics, mobile manufacturing, network products, all these areas. And in addition to that, opening up the mineral and coal sectors opens up vast opportunities. Australian companies were always interested in India, but Indian system was extremely rigid. It used to take a lot of time. We have put out bids now. The commercial mining bids for 50 major coal mines will be out in the next 15 to 20 days. Another bid for 500 mineral sites, large ones, exploration cum production will be out very shortly. So any issue, any challenge which any Australian business has is welcome to get in touch with Invest India or me directly. We will handhold them, support them, and take it forward.
That leads to a question by Mahadev and Shankar. It's for Mr. Kant and Mr. Sodhi. He says, I have a few clients who are keen to do JVs in sectors like food processing for exports to Australia and other countries besides sales within India. How does Niti Aayog plan to assist to identify JV partners and or startup manufacturing in India without major challenges of land acquisition or leases, ongoing labor migration challenges, technology protection of IP, domestic production and export incentives, forex-free flow of capital with ease of entry and exit strategies for foreign capital?
So we've created plug-and-play facilities in many areas. The Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor has created large areas where there's plug-and-play available. They can come in, invest, start manufacturing from tomorrow itself in several of our sites. All state governments are also willing to give them sites for manufacturing as and when they want to get in. There are no challenges. The liberalization on labor laws is already taking place in several states. We are putting all our labor laws in just 4 codes. One code has already been passed. Other 3 codes will be passed shortly. We are trying to make India extremely easy and simple in all these areas. We don't select joint venture partners. anyone interested in finding a joint venture partner can get in touch with Invest India. I'll facilitate that. I'll help you to find the right partner. And it's best that private sector enterprises are facilitated and we act as a catalyst and they select their best partners themselves. That is the way forward. As Mr. Sodhi had rightly said, this is a huge, huge market. Objective should be to come and look at the vast Indian domestic market and then look at exports. Use the domestic market as a springboard for exports.
And the question for Mr. Sodhi is, given very high quality of Australian dairy cattle, cows, and related dairy products, there is a high potential for export of such cattle with related production technologies to India to enhance production for export to global markets. How does one advise cattle exporters doing over 2 million cattle exports to enter the Indian market?
Well, I think this question is right. Right now, import of cattle is not, it is restricted. Reason is simple. Indian conditions are different. What we are going for imported crossbred HF semen. I mean, lot of semen is being allowed. And India, you see, out of the total milk produced, 55% is produced by the buffalo. 45% is through a cow. Out of the 45% cow, around 25% milk is from Indian breed cows and 20% is crossbred cow. And Indian milk production model is different. Our Indian milk production model, because each farmer is having 2 or 3 cattle or buffalo. So low input, low output. We do not have surplus land, a lot of thousands of acres of pastures or feed to the animals. Our is whatever is surplus after the human consumption, the roughage or the grass, dry grass, that is fed. So we need the breeds which can survive in certain conditions also and also produce milk. So right now, Government of India is also encouraging a lot of local breed because you know Gir cow, which is already in Brazil and other parts of South America, I mean they are adopting Indian breed. So we are also encouraging Indian breed, but I'm not saying no to the HF and other. But I feel opportunity is more for import of high productive cattle semen, and that too sexy.
Thank you. There is a question, I think Amitabh, this will be for you. Electric vehicles is one of the key thrust areas of the Indian government in our move to commitment towards combating climate change. India, however, suffers from not having presence or control on the upstream supply chain of EVs. Australia, on the other hand, has discovered vast reserves of lithium recently, and can we therefore, through a strategic partnership, leverage this and establish a very strong supply chain partnership with Australia and Australian companies, and maybe even bring them to India to invest in lithium processing and cell manufacturing?
So this is a massive, massive opportunity because in India, we have, unlike the rest of the world, we have, you know, if you look at United States of America, 98% of the people have vehicles. That is, they have more than 1 or 2 vehicles. Europe, almost 85%. In India, it's just about 15 to 16% of the market has been tapped. And therefore, this market is going to grow in the future. And the future, whatever we may say, is going to be shared and electric. The rapid cost at which the cost of battery is falling, it's fallen from about $1,100 per kilowatt hour to about $176 per kilowatt hour. And I envisage it to fall to about $85 to $90 per kilowatt hours in the next 2 years. And that is the point when the initial cost of procurement of battery will be cheaper than having EV car will be cheaper than having a normal car, a fossil fuel car. And therefore, in the next 3 to 4 years, even the initial cost of vehicles, electric vehicles will fall very rapidly. And therefore, batteries will be very, very critical. Now, our objective right now is to ensure that these batteries are manufactured in India. And even if lithium and nickel are imported from Australia, almost 80% of the value addition can be done in India. And many people are looking at this opportunity. We are going to open up the battery manufacturing sector in a very big way. And I think this is a huge, huge opportunity for the early starters. Lithium import and manufacturing of battery is really the future of relationship between India and Australia, and we should vigorously take it forward.
Another question from Connie de Cunha. She asks, in regards to pharma products, what are the measures the Indian pharmacy companies are doing to meet the strict Australian TGA rules?
Pharmacy?
Yes.
Indian pharmacy, as you are aware, India is the pharmacy to the world. If it wasn't for Indian companies, the world would never have got medicine at the right price points. Many Indian companies are now moving from generic to high value added products. We've opened up the innovation system in a very big way. All of them have now got into innovation, and I would suggest that whatever challenges are there out of the present regulatory regime in Australia, we will take it up with Australian governments, and we will try and work out a win-win relationship so that innovative Indian companies are able to penetrate Australian markets in the world of pharmacy.
Thank you. A question from Stephen Jones. He talks about he's asked the fundamentals of investments are market, regulatory certainty, cost of doing business, and world-class infrastructure. How will you rate India on these benchmarks?
So I would say that we've radically improved on the ease of doing business. Jumping up 79 positions is in a large country like India is very, very tough. We've now providing plug-and-play facilities, and our tax rates are the lowest in the world now. At about 15% for new companies to come in, they are the lowest in the world. Labor laws have undergone a massive transformation, and particularly the new set of radical reforms sector will greatly benefit many large-scale companies who want to come in and look at the agriculture sector production.
So Scott Farlow, another question. Can India be agile and suit investor requirements in the short term? For example, Tesla's Shanghai-based Gigafactory was built in a record time of 168 days. We need multiple such examples for India.
Yeah, so actually there are a whole range of examples of companies from Korea. If you were to look at the Hyundai plant, if you were to look at the Chinese owned MG vehicle plant in Gujarat, which was set up in just about 6 months' time. If you were to look at a whole range of manufacturing for Airbus and Boeing, all the backward integration is done here. In fact, India is the biggest supplier. We are actually the center for compact car manufacturing also. Many of these were all done in record time. You give us a proposal, we'll give you the results in less than 6 months' time.
I've got a lot more questions, but I'm just going to end with one question, and possibly for all three, and maybe if you can answer this. Do you see a possibility of India signing the Regional Comprehensive Partnership Agreement to ensure seamless and competitive flow of goods and services?
Are you referring to RCEP?
RCEP, correct.
Yeah, so it has to be, RCEP has been debated and discussed by India for a long time. We were keen to sign it, but it has to be a win-win situation. You can't open up your doors for a vast amount of Chinese imports into the region without China opening up its market for other countries to export to China. That was the challenge. that India is a very large market. We should have a scenario where we are also able to export to other countries as well. So there are some issues on which debate and discussion is still going on. We are very open to it. It's an open discussion going on, and we look forward to a win-win relationship as far as RCEP is concerned.
Thank you. It's 5 o'clock. I'm cognizant that you're all busy men. I would like to take this opportunity from Newland Global Group to thank you for participating in this important seminar. And we look forward to more dialogue with all of you. Mr. Kant, thank you very much. Mr. Sodhi, thank you very much. And Mr. Gupta, thank you so much for supporting us in this too.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.